5. Good evening. My name is Annette Latigue, and I'm your host here at Coaching You For You. Tonight, I'm again honored to have Dr. Tabitha Bellamy with us here, sharing her experience, strength, and hope about incest, depression, and a suicide attempt because she's a winner, and you're going to know the truth. Good evening, Tabitha.
Good evening. Thank you for having me back. And thank you for actually giving me the space to be able to have 3 episodes so that I don't have
Mhm.
to rush through all of it. Um,
Uh-huh.
the outpouring of people with similar stories or questions or wanting to share their survivor stories has been, I would say, a little bit overwhelming in the past week, but I welcome it. And I hope that through your viewership, you will find the strength to share your story with others, even if it's just people in your family who don't know what happened to you. I
Right.
hope that you will be able to talk to others and also become an advocate for those of us who are survivors. I read something the other day that said there are not victims, there are just people who are brave enough to tell their story, and those are yet waiting to tell. So I'm hoping that for those of you who haven't become the survivors that are outspoken, that you will find some part of the story that relates to you and think to yourself that perhaps there's one person out there who you can reach, and just find that shred of bravery to be able to share your story and reach another person.
Absolutely. And that's so important. And for now, Coaching You For You is open. We're at coachingyouforyou@gmail.com. And I want you to look forward because Tabitha has some exciting things coming. So come on, Tabitha, give it to us. We started our timer and we're ready for the story.
Okay, so last week we ended with me at Howard. We talked about, the beginning of the incest, the abuse, the physical abuse from my mother, my whole family, me included, and me being at Howard and just experiencing the best time of my life, just being happy every day, the joy that I talked about. And that was another part. I'm going to stop for a second and say thank you to all the Howard Bison who reached out after the podcast and said, I didn't realize what you had been through, and now I'm so excited that I met you, and thank you for being my friend, and thank you for being friendly, because you all really played a very integral and important part of my healing process to just welcome me as I was without question, without exception, my craziness, my California vibe, and just put your arms around me and help me heal. So I just want to put a pin in that. So Howard was going exceptionally well. I loved every second of it. And then in my junior year, the end of my junior year, I got a call from the registrar's office that said there was a problem with my transfer application packet, which was very questionable and alarming to me because I never, ever wanted to transfer away from Howard.
Mm.
So I asked a number of questions like, where is this coming from? What's happening? What school are you trying to transfer to? What's happening? Long story short, my father had gone to San Francisco State University, which is one of the colleges he named that I had to go to, requested a transfer packet for me, and forged all of the documentation to transfer me away from Howard University into San Francisco State. But for the fact that he transposed 2 digits in my social security number, I would have been transferred out of Howard into San Francisco State without my permission or knowledge. So, excuse me. When that happened, of course, I was super upset, right? I called home because that's the only way I could reach my mother. We didn't have cell phones, and my mom didn't have email. She has it now, but she still don't really know how to do email. So I had to call the home phone to talk to my mother because I wanted her to know that this was taking place. So my father answered the phone, which of course my heart dropped because I'm like, oh no, now mom's really not going to know the truth, right? So I said, I need to talk to mommy. And he's like, what about? And I'm like, oh, it's personal. It's, female problems, things like that. And he said, she's not available. And I said, okay, well, can you tell her I called and ask her to call me back today or whatever? And he said, if you're calling about San Francisco State, there's nothing she can do about it. And there's nothing she can do to stop me. So at that point, I knew I was essentially trapped. So I just started crying and I'm screaming and I'm like, why won't you leave me alone? And he said, because you don't follow my rules. You refuse to follow my rules. So I'm thinking back on all the things I had overcome to get to Howard University, how I'm matriculating without any problems. He goes behind my back to try to disenroll me at the school of my dreams and enroll me into a school that's about 45 minutes from home so that he can get to me.
So essentially, he was stalking you.
That was the beginning of the adult stalking. And so at that point, I decided I'm not safe, right? Like just going away to college, being 3,000 miles away isn't safe. My dream was to become a medical doctor, a pediatric anesthesiologist. So, like my classmates, I was, studying for the MCAT, looking at medical schools, looking at
Mhm.
internship programs. And then I decided I can't do any of this because MCAT, if I don't get the score I need to get into a medical school, I have to move back home. Like all my friends were like, oh, we'll just move back home or I'll do a post back, or like they had all these options. And I said, home is still not safe for me. Even
Yes.
after everything I've been through, I'm now a full adult. I'm 21 years old. I can't move back home because he is still trying to have a hold on my life. He feels in some way like he owns me, and this is not okay. So I went to my advisor, Dr. Muriel Poston, who I love so much to this day, and I said, I need a job that I can do with a bachelor's degree in biology. And she's like, what about medical school? I said, I can't do medical school. I don't want to talk about why. I can't do that. I don't want to do any MCAT study classes. I just need to get a job. And so she said, oh, well, you can be a teacher. You can be a science teacher. Your grades are good enough. You've had all these specialty study classes. You'll be an excellent teacher. So she hooked me up into this Teach for America program. And I started down that path. And I was like, okay, good. I'm going to have a job. I'm going to have money. I'll have a place to live. I never have to go back home and deal with him again. So I'm on that path, really happy. My brother Nelson, the one who's now deceased, called me. This is like February of my senior year. I still remember, and said, I have some really bad news. And I'm thinking, okay, what happened to mommy? Because that's the only bad news in my life, right? Nothing else matters. And he said, mom and dad are getting a divorce. And I was like, oh, thank God. This is the best news ever of life. Has he moved out? Can I come home? And he's like, what do you mean? Like, what's happening? I'm like, I've been waiting for them to get divorced for my entire life. I'm so excited. So I'm thinking about it and I'm like, okay, I need to call my mom and talk to her, but also still being that girl from 5 years old who decided I need to protect my mom. I thought, you know what? Her whole life is being torn apart right now. I don't think it's a good time for me to tell her that the man who she adored, even though he was crazy and abusive, she adored him,
Mhm.
also molested her oldest daughter. Because I think that's just too much to deal with that one time. So I was like, I'm just going to talk about the divorce, nothing else. And I also didn't want to have to face the fear of what about people in my family who may not approve of the message or think I'm lying or think that I'm just making this up to keep my parents apart. I just had so many scenarios running through my head. So I just talked to my mom about the divorce. We talked about the proceedings, the things that she was going through on a regular basis.
Mhm.
And then one day she called and said, your father is fighting me for full custody of Jay. That's my sister's name. I'm not going to, put her Jay. So I thought about my sister, Jay, who was a teenager, young teenager at that time, and I just blurted out without thinking, you can't let him have her. He molested me. And I
Mhm.
mean, we could have heard a pin drop on carpet during that moment. I started hearing, you hear somebody crying in the background. Like my mother's like, she's like, oh my God, oh my God. Oh my, that's all she kept saying. Oh my God. She's like, I can't. I don't, oh my God. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And I said, no, no, no. And I just don't want you to let him take Jay. That's really why I'm telling you this. I'm not trying to tear anybody's life up. I just don't want him to have full access to Jay because if he did these things to me when everybody was in the house, I can only imagine what he would attempt to do to her by herself. And so my uncle was dean of the chapel at Howard. He has a PhD in counseling psychology. And so my mother said, "Does he know?" And I said, "No, I haven't told anybody else." She said, "Well, talk to him and talk to your aunt, her sister, who's his wife. They'll know what to do for you because you're going to need help. This is going to be hard." And she's like, "I'm going to go talk to my friends and, my therapist, and because we're going to need help. This is going to be hard." And she was right. It was really hard because honestly, that is really when the shit hit the fan. I mean, all the things that I was
Mm.
scared of since I was 12 as a 22-year-old were coming to fruition. Some ministers in the community thinking the devil is using me to ruin his ministry, that my mother had put me up to saying this. Um, all the way down to my paternal grandmother, who I love, God rest her soul, but she's so ingrained in the Black community and this old, like, protect the minister and protect the man, and blame the survivor to say, "Well, what were you wearing?" And I'm like, my nightgown. I was 12. I was in my bed the first time it happened. Usually my nightgown, grandma, but I don't really know what that has to do with anything that I'm telling you right now. So it was a very, very hard time on top of trying to graduate from college and, get this job as a teacher. But I would say that one of the things that was the most successful and instrumental was the thing that my mother said: talk to your uncle and talk to your aunt. They're going to get you help and you're going to need that help because this is going to be really hard, which was very true because navigating family turning their back on me. And to this day, there are still some people in my family who I have no communication with, well over 25 years, because they don't really believe me, thinking that I was trying to set him up. Some of the ministers in his community feeling like I wasn't being honest. I was on my mother's side. I was letting the devil use me to destroy his ministry. It was just very hard for me because I'm like, why would I make something up? Why would I lie about the thing that is the most shameful and painful in my entire life? Right. So that on top of graduating college was really hard. Um,
Tabitha, let me jump in here for a minute because you just said something that is critical to every parent or caretaker understanding. Rarely is a kid going to lie about something that could possibly destroy everything and everybody. And hurt people hurt people. Listen to your kids. Kudos to your mom again for recognizing that not only was she there, but that you needed help.
yeah, big time. And help that I didn't even know because this had become such a part of my norm to suppress, not talk about it. And then talking about it is one thing, but then having the ridicule, having people who you've looked up to for your entire life disbelieve you, call you a liar, saying you're being used by the devil. There's no kid in their right mind. Now, some kids may be mentally ill and they make up stories, but there's no kid who's in their right mind who's being successful and a rule follower who's going to make up a story this egregious and to the level of detail that I was able to provide. Right. So that was just my mom. When I first told her, she was like, "Yeah, that sounds horrible, but I believe, like, there's no reason you would lie. There's no reason that you would say this just to keep us from getting back together, and not getting divorced, because a two-parent, two-income home was very much beneficial to me, more so than a single mom who, was going through all these court battles with two kids that she had full custody of." So that also became one of my passion points of really listening to people when they say this happened to me and when they are willing to provide graphic detail, explicit detail. Nobody would make these kind of things up. Like, it's nobody in their right mind, at least, would make these kind of things up because it makes you feel gross. It makes you feel like Something's wrong with you. You should be discarded. Why would an adult be attracted to a child in such a crass and lascivious way? There's nothing that says this is okay. So nobody would make these kind of stories up. So because we were going through all those things, graduated, moved back to California because I was like, I want to support my mom. She's going through all these things with the custody battle. My siblings, my two younger siblings were still in high school. And as my father predicted, his ministry was going to be destroyed. He was not being invited to preach. He was removed as moderator for panels and from the different, associations of churches. And he was angry, very, very angry with me, stalked me relentlessly. Like, I had all these jobs because, I was a new teacher. I wanted to be a doctor, but I was a teacher and I needed to raise all this money to fund my lifestyle and things. And he would be, waiting for me outside of my job at 6 p.m. on a November night, which means it's pitch black, right? So I come out, he's sitting on the hood of my car. You have to tell people you're not telling the truth, because I had to, talk to the police and my mother's attorneys and talk to the judge and do all these statements so that my sister Jay would not go to my father for even visitation without supervision. So he began to stalk me relentlessly. I had to move out of where I was living with my cousin. We had a beautiful condo, but he knew where we lived. And so he just stalked me until the point I needed to move. I had to find my own place that was gated and I had a security guard. I mean, it was just my worst nightmare. So I'm like, why would anybody do this on purpose unless what they're saying is absolutely true? Because my life was just hell. I could tell you that didn't want to kill myself. I just wished that I could trade places with somebody else that, had a better life, a dad who loved her, a dad who protected her, not a dad who was a predator. So, I went through that for a few years. And then the guy I was dating proposed to me in this beautiful proposal on Martha's Vineyard. And
Mm.
I was so excited. I was like, absolutely yes, without question, without hesitation. Let's get married. Let's start planning. But the problem was with that, I did not take the time to really fix myself. I had this beautiful wedding. We had this amazing honeymoon. His family was very well heeled. So I was like, okay, I'm in good shape, right? We're not going to be poor. We have the HBCU pedigree, the Morehouse Howard girl, his family's Jack and Jill. My mom is a Jack and Jill mom. Like, everything looked amazing, but I still wasn't fixed. I had not really and truly taken the time to dismantle all the way down to that 5-year-old girl who felt like the world wasn't a safe place and she had to protect herself and she had to protect her mother and, do all these things to exist. So I started throwing myself into accomplishments in academia and education, which I say thank God for every day, because I could have thrown myself into, drugs, alcohol, prostitution, those kind of things that people do because they want to escape the pain, which I wanted to escape the pain as well. But really, I just was trying to feel like I was good enough, right? Like I wasn't gross. My existence wasn't an accident, that there wasn't something fundamentally wrong with me that made a grown man attracted to his own child. So I was like, let me go back to school. Let me go back to school again. Let me get, which thank God, because it really pans out to a great living, right? I created this amazing career for myself. I was elected to all these boards to serve in different capacities. But anytime anything monumentally huge happened, I would blame myself. So, like if my husband had a bad day at work and he came home and he was really angry and, talking about all these things, I was like, oh my God, I should have been able to fix this for him. Like, I just internalized everything as being my fault. If after having kids, I didn't drop the weight as fast. I was like, it's because you're gross. It's because, you're not beautiful. You're not healthy. Something is fundamentally wrong with you. That was the voice inside my head pretty much every single day. And it didn't matter how much money I made, how many boards I was nominated to participate in. Every single, I would say, maybe not every single day, but every single week at some point, this voice would be in my head saying, like, but you're so gross. Like, why would your father have come into your room when you were a kid? Something's wrong with you. Something like is just fundamentally flawed about you. You're gross. It doesn't matter how much weight you lose, you're gross. It doesn't matter how much weight you gain, you're gross. It doesn't matter how much money you make, something's wrong with you all the time. And so that just became like kind of my life where I would go to all these things, I would participate in all these events. Everybody is like, your family is beautiful, your kids are beautiful, everything is amazing. But deep inside of me, at some point, without fail, every week, 52 weeks of a year, I would think that something was wrong with me. I was disgusting, I was gross, and I was fundamentally flawed. So, sorry. So,
Tabitha,
right.
I just want to say that your story is impacting me in an unexpected way. I also suffered abuse from two doctors who attempted to rape me. And I've talked about it, I've shared about it, I've been in therapy about it. But it's still, like you just said, makes an impact because you wonder what would make a grown man be attracted to a child. So I just want to thank you for your transparency and your honesty. Go ahead.
Yeah, it just, you just can't get away from yourself, right? Like I would I remember when I was a teenager, I would take all these, we had water restrictions because we were in California, drought land, so we had very strict restrictions. But we had 2-minute showers during the high season of the drought, and I would scrub and scrub and scrub my skin until it was bright red because I just was like, you're dirty, you're gross. I just wanted it off, right? And when you look in the mirror and you're like, this is the person I don't like, that there's nothing you can do. You can't get away from yourself. And that's one of the things I used to say to my ex-husband. We'd be like, like, you're doing all these things. I don't understand why you're not happy. And I was like, I can't get away from you don't understand what it's like when you can't get away from the person you hate the most, and that person is yourself. And I was like, but I wasn't willing to really do the work because that requires, stop being on the board of Jack and Jill, stop being on the board of AKA, take some time off work, take some time away from being the vice president of a national educational assessment board, those type of things to do the work. But surely life will catch up with you and get you to the point where you're forced to do it if you don't want to do it yourself. So
Yeah.
my marriage was picture perfect. Had a lot of great times, not going to lie and pretend like the whole thing was wrong. I didn't fix myself. He had his own issues, but together, combined, we were able to really fake it until we could make it, until life just starts hitting you over and over when your parents are old and, you've got I have my stepson who was having issues with his father, and, just things, or your kids are growing up and kids crying, even if they were somebody got hurt. I would be like, why are they crying? Did you hit my kids? Don't touch my kids. I told you you're not allowed to hit my kids, because that was triggering me from my childhood and the
Yeah.
abuse and things like that. So finally, we got to the place where our marriage was completely eroding. Every day was worse than the day before. I was like, this is really horrible. However, I'm not a failure. I'm not a quitter. I'm not a loser. Like, let's just keep fixing it. Let's go to therapy. Let's play these games together. Let's go on a retreat. And I will never forget when we sat in therapy, we had been with the same therapist for 7 years consecutively. And it's almost our 15th anniversary. We're supposed to have this big renewal thing that we're going to do in another country. And I'm like, that's his pseudonym. Hasn't been helping me plan for, the renewal ceremony. I don't know what's going on. I feel like maybe he's too busy with work or maybe he's too busy with this. And he said, No, it's not any of those things. I just don't wanna be married anymore. I don't wanna be married to you. I'm not in love with you. I don't want this. And I'm like, but we're here in therapy. Like, can we talk about this? The therapist is like, is there anything that I can do? Is there anything that we can do together? And he said, no, I just don't want to do it anymore. Got up and walked out of the therapy session. And I'm on the couch. I'm sitting there, crying. I'm like, why are we paying you? What just happened? She's like, life threw a curveball. I don't really know what's going on.
Mm,
We'll try to have more sessions. So we tried to have more sessions, but the message was consistent. Like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be married. I'm just not in love with you anymore. And over time, I've come to take that as just some people grow apart or some people grow the same and in different directions, right? One person just veers off and decide they don't want to do that anymore. But for me, having always been the perfectionist who made everything right in the house, who was the protector, who was, just the person who looked out for everybody, my mother, my siblings, had done all these things to get all these academic accomplishments, to be a good person, to erase the feeling of grossness and something being fundamentally wrong with me. I couldn't fix this. And that was very hard, very, very hard for me to accept. That I couldn't fix this. I couldn't change his mind. I
mm,
tried every single day, cook different food, wear different clothes, wear the lingerie, like everything I could. How can I change his mind? And he said, I just don't want this anymore. And I'm like, is it because you think I'm gross? Is there something wrong with me? And in turn, he's like, I just don't want it. I don't have a word for it. I just don't want this anymore. And
mm,
that was when I just became that 12-year-old girl all over again, who was completely consumed with something is wrong with me. No matter what I do, it's not good enough. No matter what I achieve, it's not high enough. I don't belong here. My life is a waste and I should die. And so that became my obsession. And honestly, I staved it off for about 20 months, I can say, because of my children, who I love with all of my heart. I was like, I would cry every night from about midnight. I would put my kids, help them with their homework, read them stories, make sure they have their baths, showers, whatever, get them in bed, cry from about between 11 o'clock and midnight till about 3 to 4 a.m. Um, Wash my face, put my makeup on, start getting ready for work, get my kids up, all those kind of things, and just keep going through that day after day after day because I'm like, I have a job, I have all these responsibilities, I'm a mother, but that part of in me that had been there since I was 5 that I never fixed just really became overwhelming and just took over every aspect of my existence. And so finally one day, let me see, I can tell you the day, May 3rd, 2017, we had a big fight. We had to have the police involved because that's how big the fight was, where I
this is your husband.
yes, and I did not feel comfortable, so I had to call the police. Um, and so without getting into graphic details, they asked him to leave. I was staying there, whatever. And then I texted one of my friends and said, I just can't do this anymore. And that was it. And then I attempted suicide. And I'm not going to give any type of details because for people who really are consumed with suicidal ideation, they take every type of grain of information and try to incorporate it into their lives. So I'm never going to give them anything to work with. However, I can say that I was the closest to success I've ever been in my entire life that night. So I remember waking up on May 4th of 2017 in the crisis hospital for the state of New Jersey. And the first thing I said, I was like hooked up to all these machines. And I said in my head, oh shit, I'm still alive. Because now everybody knows, right? Like what I tried to do, how I tried to do it, the reason I tried to do it. And now everybody's invested and involved in what's really happening. And I couldn't hide behind my degrees. I couldn't hide behind my career. I couldn't hide behind my accolades or the boards that I was on or any of the things I was doing because I had been stripped down to nothing. Being in that moment where I'm in the hospital with all these machines on me and they know everybody knows why I'm there. Except my kids. We kept them very protected. Thank God my parents were great for that. But all the adults in my life knew exactly why I was there. So I would say thank God for my friend who was like, Tabby sent me a cryptic message. I don't like it. Can somebody go to her house and check on her? Which is what they did, and that's how I was found, instead of my kids finding me. But that was not my finest hour, I would say, to wake up with everything and then just be like, I'm still here. So now I have to face my reality and I have to fix it because I'm going to be forced to fix it because everybody knows now that I was in a huge amount of pain that I was hiding, and we're going to be forced to take it apart brick by brick and get all the way down to below the foundation and figure out why we got this low. So the funny story I tell, well, a few of my friends know, is that I woke up, as I said, oh shit, I'm still alive. Cause I'm like, oh God, now they're going to ask me all these questions. They're going to force me to do something that I don't want to do because I would like to go back into my bubble of pretending that I'm fine. Right. So,
So, Tabitha, could you tell us a little bit about that pretending part? Because I think the audience needs to hear how, um, when we're in pain, we try to disguise it.
especially when you are high achieving, high performing, high earning, have a ton of resources to help you hide it, it's easier. So, I could travel a lot for work. I could sign up for other work trips to travel and be away, and just not have to be at home so that I didn't have to face the pain. Or, take my kids on a great vacation out of the country so I could just be away and I didn't have to face the pain. And when you can afford good makeup, you can cry all night, right? And then get up in the morning, put a great eye mask on, a face mask, get your mascara on, and you come into work looking fresh faced, even though you've been crying all night. So I think for a lot of, and I know a number of people who I've talked to, even since last week, have experienced the same kind of things, but the greater resources you have, the greater things you have at your disposal to help you mask what you're going through, right? So if you don't have a lot of money, you really can't afford an expensive mask. But if you have a good amount of money coming in and a good amount of resources and supports around you, you can afford a very expensive mask that is able to make you look so beautiful. Nobody knows you have any problems in your life, and nobody can even see when you're in crisis because you can hide it so well. So that was one of the things I had become a master of. I mean, starting when I was younger, I, was good at hiding all the stuff that was going on in my house. But as I got older and I'm, going to meetings and saying, "Oh, hi, I'm really sorry, guys. I need to take 2 hours off from this meeting. I'm just, I can't be at the reception tonight because I'm just I'm really having a hard time. I'm tired, or, I just had a jet lag from my flight or things like that." People would give me the time off without question because I was Dr. Tabitha Bellamy McKinley. So they didn't question me, as if I was, maybe if I was a shift worker at Taco Bell, right? I couldn't take 2 days off to just get my life together or just cry in my closet. I have to come to work. I have to show up, have to be present for my kids in order to make that money. But when you get up higher and higher, you're able really to hide behind other boards, other meetings, your friends' events. Oh, I'm sorry, my husband couldn't make it today because he had to go out of country for this trip, as opposed to, no, he's just sitting at home sulking, and we're having a really big fight right now, but he doesn't want to come. And I don't want to tell people that we're struggling right now and I need help. So that was one of the things I became really, really good at. But I mean, I had a lot of practice because I had been doing it since I was 5 years old, making excuses for home, hiding the bruises, hiding the welts, not saying that I was abused in my relationship, but just I was emotionally abused. I was emotionally welted because I really had never taken that time to fix that part of me that was so broken and destroyed that the money was a great cover and it was a great escape for things that needed to be fixed. And once you reach a certain level, people don't question you. So they're just like, okay, she's tired. She's been in other meetings. She's been in these boards and that board. So if she said she needs to take 2 hours off, we're going to give her 2 hours off. If she says she can't make it tomorrow, we're okay with that because she's really busy.
And that happens a lot in a lot of situations. And so, for family and friends, please just pay attention. Pay attention.
Yeah.
Everything's not always what it appears to be.
Yeah.
And we get lost in that because social media has groomed us to be perfect. It's groomed us to not tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And so, your transparency here tonight is not just amazing because it's going to help so many others, but it's amazing because you've healed enough to be able to share it.
And that's not easy. And I've talked to people like I said from last week to this week, the number I've talked to has been astronomical. But it's been the message is consistent. You have to heal. You cannot go from relationship to relationship, job to job,
That's right.
career to career, chapter to chapter of your sorority, unless you fix what's fundamentally flawed about yourself and really take time to do the hard work and dismantle the things that have hurt you and that are impacting the way you think about yourself. You really cannot reach your greatest potential. So the joke that I have with my best friend Catherine is when I was in the crisis center, in Trenton, our state capital, for those who have attempted self-harm. I was like, oh, just kidding. I have to go to work tomorrow. When am I getting discharged? And they're like, oh yeah, no, you're not getting discharged.
Mm,
You are being committed, well, they said involuntarily admitted to a
mm.
facility. And I was like, oh, that's not good. Okay. So I'm like, okay, you finally went too far, not far enough that you're dead, but you went too far that now this healing has been taken away from you and it's been placed into somebody's hands so that it has to happen. So they brought some pamphlets. They said, you can decide where you want to go, or we can decide where you're going to go, but you have to go somewhere. You cannot go home. So in my fog of being like, I can't believe this is happening to me, I looked at all the brochures. In my mind, I saw one that said the Hamptons, and I was like, I love the Hamptons. I want to go to this place. It was actually not the Hamptons as we know it. It was Hampton Behavioral Center in South Jersey. So when I arrived there, I remember just being like, this isn't the Hamptons. They said I was going to the Hamptons. They were like, nobody said you were going to the Hamptons. We said Hampton Behavioral Health Center. And I will tell you right now, that was the best thing that could have happened to me ever. Um, my roommate was a very, very successful executive in a company who has some challenges that she just was struggling with. We were there for the same reason. And therapy was mandatory for 8 hours a day. They would wake you up. It was almost like jail. Wake you up, go to breakfast, go to therapy for all these hours. And you get a little break, have a snack, go to therapy, have another break, go to lunch, go to therapy. I mean, we had art therapy, we had music therapy, we had group therapy, individual therapy, yoga therapy, play therapy. We had like speakers come in, and then individually they would dismantle every part of you all the way down. Like, tell me about your first memory of life. Like, can you remember anything before age 2? Can you remember anything before age 3? Just break you down to nothing to build us all back up again. And then we had to go to intensive outpatient therapy. And they were like, if you don't follow this program, you're coming back to inpatient. And so I told everybody who knows me knows that I've been to inpatient, I've been to outpatient. I said, if you've ever been traumatized as a child in any way that you can remember, please check yourself at the very least into an intensive outpatient program, which is 3 hours of therapy, 3 days a week for at least 4 months. Because you just can't go through life without fixing yourself. And it's hard. There were days where I was like, all I did was cry for all 8 hours of therapy. Some days I was like, I just need to go in my room and be in a ball, in a blanket and just lay there and not crying, but just stare at the wall. But if you've been traumatized, you owe it to yourself to fix yourself so that you can live your best life. So when I say at this point, I am living my best life, it's not just the tag phrase, because we didn't know the song before I started thinking to myself, my life is really good. My life is really awesome. It's that you really have to, and I hope people don't have to get to the point of where they attempt suicide before they decide to go and fix themselves. But it's just the best thing that could have ever happened to me, that I want this for anybody who's ever been traumatized. And here's a pro tip that a lot of, especially Black people, don't know. Insurance will pay for it at 100%.
That's right.
I ended up paying $0.00 for my inpatient and my intensive outpatient program. I paid $0.
So help is available and the insurance will pay for it. And if you don't have insurance, sometimes the state picks it up. But get help. Get help.
Yeah, get help. And also, be the one thing I want to say is when the R. Kelly things first came forth and everybody, was blaming, why didn't these kids say, why didn't these girls say? I was on another podcast when that first happened, talking about my book that I've written for survivors of sexual abuse.
What's the
A
name of
lot
that book?
daily devotionals for survivors of sexual abuse. It's on Amazon
Okay.
under my name. But a lot of times, as I shared with the way that my father just kept coming back, you can't get away, you can't get away. I thank God that I was in college, at a great college, right? That I had all the resources and I was going to have a degree. And I had my uncle and my aunt who were there to support me in getting through these things. But my story is really not the norm, honestly. For I do a lot of work in women's shelters and homeless shelters. There are so many people there who have been victimized and abused, who are not survivors right now, right? They're still victims, and they don't have the resources in place to help them get to where they want to be. And they're still very much scared and in bondage to their abusers. So thinking to myself, if I didn't have my uncle and aunt and my advisor to say, here, get this job, here's how you're going to make money, here's where you can live with my cousin Cynthia, who I love. I don't know what I would have done, honestly. Because when you're in a position where the access to power is so disjointed, where the adult has all the money, all the power in the position of R. Kelly, all the status, all these fans, and you're the person who has been their target, you just don't want to come forward. You don't want to say anything because you're like, my life is going to be destroyed and I have no recourse. So whenever you hear somebody come forward, with the things with the church and the Catholic Church and the priests, and not just R. Kelly, but other people who come forward in adulthood, applaud them. That's all I can say. There have been a number of people who've come forward and like, I haven't told anybody this happened to me 40, 50 years ago. Applaud them, thank them for their bravery, and ask, what can I do to help you heal? And how can I support you? And those are the only right answers.
And that's important. And so tonight we want to wrap up, and I'd like to share that it's important. It's important that you listen and you hear. Don't just listen, but hear. Because a lot of times kids are reaching out and you're listening, but you're not hearing them. And so the attempted rapes from two doctors, trusted family doctors, traumatized me. But like your mother, my mother reached out and said, "Hey, I'm going to deal with this and I'm going to help you get through this." And I'm grateful for that because the therapy that ensued after that made a difference in my life as it did in yours. And so, coaching you for you family, I want to thank you for returning. I want to thank you for sharing this evening with us. We have an episode 3 that's coming next Wednesday, same time, same place. We are sharing Dr. Tabitha's experience, strength, and hope with trauma. And that trauma has happened to boys and girls. And it's time for you to tell your truth so that you can heal.
Yes.
Dr. Tabitha Bellamy didn't become who and what she is because she wasn't interested in healing. She was absolutely interested in healing,
Mhm.
and she was absolutely interested in sharing her experience, strength, and hope. So I want to invite you back again next Wednesday for part 3, the final chapter. And then I want you to look forward to seeing Dr. Tabitha Bellamy in other podcasts coming near you soon. Hey, listen, don't ignore a kid. Hear them, listen and hear, and
Yeah.
get help.
Yeah.
And for everybody out there who's suffering, I want you to know that there are people available to help you. And I know because my rape was attempted and I got the help I needed. I want to
And
thank you
it
for
doesn't matter how long ago it happened, who did it. There's always at least one person who is willing to listen,
that's right.
and there is always somebody who will believe you.
That's right. Because even if a kid is exaggerating to some point, which Tabitha wasn't, there's something else going on. Look up, look ahead, and pay attention.
Amen.
Tabitha, I want to thank you. I
Thank
want to
you.
again salute your mother for believing you, as my mother did in the attempted rapes with me. And
Mhm.
I want to thank your children for being brave enough to listen and hear you.
Amen.
Coaching you for you family. Thank you, Tabitha. You have anything you want to say before we close?
Come back for part 3. And thank you to my soror Annette for having me on.
Yes. And this podcast is available for anybody who wants to tell their story. And again, look forward to Tabitha. She has some Dr. Tabitha. She has some exciting things coming toward
2023.
a place near you soon. I don't want you to miss it. Tabitha, thank you. I'll see you
Thank
next
you.
week. We're
Yes.
going to wrap up next week with your story of survival and your comeback because
Yes,
that's
ma'am.
important. There's always a comeback. Thank you all.
Always.
Good night. I'll see you next week. Good night.